Hello, Robs. We return with So the Witch Won't Eat Me. Fantasy and the Child's Fib, Infanticide by Dorothy Bloch. We continue with the phone call to Mommy and Dad from little Ellie and her obvious therapist, Ms. Bloch, about why Ellie believes her father wants to kill her. I can't get over her casualness, he reported, when I told her you were on the phone. She said, as cool as a cucumber. I know. I asked her to call. 5 minutes after I had hung up, my phone rang. It was Ellie. I wanted to ask Mommy too, she asked. That would be fine, I agreed. Could we all go into the playroom first, and then you come in, she inquired. Why do you want to do that? I asked. It would be goodly, she assured me, me and my mommy and my daddy would be there, and then you come in. I readily agreed, assuring her it would be exactly as she wanted it. Never before in my career had a 5-year-old asked for such a confrontation, and for such a reason. In anticipation of the meeting, I speculated about the course it might take and the consequences. Nothing that I thought of, however, prepared me for its utter simplicity or for its effectiveness. The family arrived and, as Ellie had requested, seated themselves in the playroom. Ellie in her casual chair at the little corner table, her parents at a distance so that she had to turn slightly away from the table in order to face them. I entered and also sat in my unusual child's chair at the table with Ellie. Everyone seemed quite subdued. I looked at Ellie's slightly flushed, slightly smiling face and asked, Do you want to begin, Ellie? She shyly looked at her father, whose face had turned a dull red, and stated, I think you want to kill me, do you? No, her father stated flatly, and without any show of emotion. I don't want to kill you. Then why do you keep a gun in your drawer? Ellie pursued. It's a souvenir from the war, he stated. It doesn't have any bullets. But you could buy some more. I won't, her father stated. I won't ever use it. I think it's the gun that makes it hard for Ellie to believe that you won't kill her, I intervened. Can anything be done about it? I don't really need the gun, said her father. I can get rid of it. Do you think that would make you stop believing that your father will kill you? I asked. Yes, Ellie agreed. And there seemed nothing else that anybody wanted to say. Ellie turned to her play, in which she at first tried to involve her parents, but I felt awkwardly and with some strain. Would you like your parents to wait for you now in the waiting room? I asked. That seemed to meet with everybody's approval, and they left. That was the last session before the summer vacation. Although, as I learned later, the gun was seemingly too essential to the father's feeling of security for him to keep his promise, Ellie's direct confrontation with him in my presence was apparently sufficiently reassuring to liberate her from the intensity of the fear that he would kill her. After her return, she was free of her previous preoccupations and appeared to be very much in the real world. Ellie's interest in wee-wees had first been expressed in relation to the family of dolls with sex characteristics that occupy a shelf in the playroom. She had appeared quite entranced by the sight of them and expressed her interest freely. Now she reported to me with exaggerated indignation, There's a very bad boy at school and he showed me his wee-wee. I contemplated her frowning self-righteousness for a moment and then I said, I have a feeling that you like wee-wees. What? I love them, she admitted, all smiles. There was also certain words that the similarly reported to me one day were very bad and she would never say them, especially, she cleared, the one that rhymes with duck. Oh, you mean fuck? I asserted with an air of discovery. You embarrass me when you say that, she declared. That's a bad word and I don't want to hear it. My mother says I must never say it. This woman is absolutely insane. Oh, well, I answered. She didn't mean here. Here we say anything. You know that. But Ellie's alarm and her fear of having her defense against such words undermined were very real. After I had clarified with her mother a healthier approach to the problem, Ellie arrived at her session with the statement, You know about the word that rhymes with duck? Well, it's all right if I say it sometimes. I say all the bad words together. Do you want to hear me? My assent set off, fuck, shit, hell, and damn. On another occasion, as we were playing on the terrace, Ellie warned. I'm going to say all the bad words, and out they came. During the final period of her treatment, Ellie's father was at home only on weekends. At the beginning of one session during this time, Ellie announced, I have a problem. Can you help me? And then she went on to explain, whenever I want something and I can't have it, I cry. And I just cry and cry and cry, and my daddy gets mad. I want to stop it. Do you know how I can? I thought for a moment and then asked, what happens when you cry and cry and cry? I get what I want, Ellie promptly answered. Well, I think I know how you can stop, I replied, but it isn't easy. You have to tell your mother not to give you what you want when you cry. If you know she won't give it to you, you'll stop crying. Ellie looked incredulous. Do you mean, she asked, that I have to tell my mother not to give me what I want? That's right, I assured her, and then you'll stop crying. And as I learned from her mother soon after, Ellie actually carried out my recommendation. Unfortunately, there is a little more to tell of Ellie's development. Shortly after, at a point where Ellie was just beginning to feel safe enough to release her aggressive feelings in relation to me, the family returned to Detroit and removed her from treatment. If we follow the evolution of Ellie's fantasies to their remarkable culmination, we are in a position to understand their function as a defense against her fear of infanticide, and to learn something of the child's vulnerability and her way of perceiving the world. The particular purposes of her fantasies were to make inaccessible her terror of being killed by her parents and her perception of their hating and violently rejected feelings, and to preserve the possibility of eventually winning their love. Her magical concept of her own powers, which made her responsible for the unhappy developments in her life, reinforced the need to blame herself and helped to keep alive the hope that when she changed, so would her parents' feelings. Her fantasy of a monster who perpetually pursued but never caught her not only permitted her to express and to master her terror, but by transferring her father's murderous feelings to an imaginary figure, allowed her to maintain a loving image of him and to camouflage the real source of her fear. Her early fantasies of the giraffe and the baby monsters were instruments of self-deception. Although when she emerged from her fantasy, she stated, my father wants to kill me and I don't know why. These initial concepts of herself, which focused on her own murderous response, concealed the precipitating cause, her father's violence and his destructive feelings, yet justified it. Similarly, the baby and bratty child fantasy defended her against her perception of her mother's rejecting feelings. The images of the incorrigible child and the perfect, all suffering mother enabled her to deceive herself in fantasy, as she did in reality, into believing that she was to blame for her mother's feelings. Her mother's inevitable depressions following her father's necessary departures convinced Ellie that not only didn't her father love either of them, but that her mother didn't love her. That impression was further reinforced by her mother's frequent indispositions, which Ellie ascribed to her own misbehavior and her anger and interpreted as a measure of her mother's rejecting feelings. The dynamic relationship between Ellie's fantasies and her parental environment was demonstrated most clearly in this theme. The baby or bratty child fantasy, which started out as a way of justifying her mother's inability to meet Ellie's overriding need for her love, became increasingly suicidal. I don't know about that. In response to her mother's deepening depression and Ellie's growing hopelessness of ever securing that love. The scale of her terror and her suicidal despair was undoubtedly influenced by both her vulnerability as a child and her magical thinking. Her perception of her father's violent disposition, reinforced by the presence of his gun and her own helplessness, convinced her he would kill her. All she could do was run. Her child's appraisal of her relationship to her mother, as well as her magical equation of wishes and deeds, also persuaded her that if she let her mother out of her sight, she would never see her again. Ellie's confrontation with her father was the culmination of a process that had extended over a period of a year and a half. The eagle strength that allowed Ellie to request and to carry it through had built up very gradually as a result of her weekly sessions and of her parents' improved way of relating to her. Her behavior had begun to change almost immediately with the commencement of treatment and permitted her parents to feel more relaxed with her. The pacifier was soon relinquished, and the tantrums ceased as her parents learned how to handle them. The bedwetting also stopped, and the oppositional needs diminished. Once her mother understood the sources of Ellie's misbehavior, she was also able to modify her treatment sufficiently so that Ellie was able increasingly to believe in her love. Although her father was able to respond in a more limited way to Ellie's needs, he recognized that he played a role in her problems and agreed to leave discipline to his wife. Ellie's growing maturity and her developing understanding of her part in his violent outbursts also led her to change in her way of relating to him. As psychoanalytic intervention modified her parents' attitudes and succeeded in reducing Ellie's terror, she was able to abandon the fantasies that had defended her against it. The gradual lessening of her fear, reflected in the modifications of her fantasies, entered a new phase with the departure of the monster for another country. The dance of sadness, her first undisguised revelation of her true feelings, followed soon after and led first to the disclosure of her central occupation, the verbalization that her father would actually kill her, and then to the confrontation. We can only speculate about the course of Ellie's development had she been able to remain in treatment. The rage that hid beneath her suicidal depression was just beginning to find expression, as her need to say the bad words indicated. Releasing her aggression through verbal means would have been the next objective in her therapy. All right. Mighty Mouse, The Birth and Death of a Defensive Fantasy comes next time. Goodbye, Rob. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. You suicidal bastards.